My name is Louise. I am the editor of Drone Professional 1. This book came out earlier this year. It's a bestseller on Amazon, and it contains chapters written by 16 different professional experts from the drone industry, covering a whole bunch of topics, applications, current best thinking, best practice, covering a wide range of aspects of the drone industry, whether it's software design to aircraft design, applications in surveying, construction, and conservation, and so on. I've got one of those experts with me today. It's Jim Oliver from DataSight in the USA, Colorado. And yeah, hi, welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Louise. I really appreciate you having me. It's great to finally talk. So yeah.
Cool. Absolutely, yes, it is actually. We haven't chatted properly before.
No.
Great. If I can sort of jump straight into the top question, which is, what do you do? What's your background?
Well, my background actually, my educational background is hydrology and geology, and then I jumped right out of school into the environmental consulting industry and was active in site investigation and remediation for over 30 years. And then I had an opportunity about 10 years ago to join a new group or a new service that was starting with international oil field services company, Schlumberger, and was really introduced to technology and the concept of technology workflows and how data can be used through the whole cycle in terms of starting with maybe geophysical logging of an individual borehole. All those boreholes can be put together to evaluate a reservoir, and then that data can then be used for, you know, simulation of production, and that type of technology workflow really intrigues me. You know, especially the technology adoption and how we generally improve our data collection processes and how we are able to make better decisions, because that's really what it's about. I mean, so if you look at, you know, better technology allows better decision making. That's really what kind of interested me towards drones. And then when I left Schlumberger, that's when drones were just starting to come up, and we started looking at various sensor technologies. And just a couple of years ago, we formed DataSight as a startup and was one of the founders. And now we're providing services for power utilities, oil and gas, construction, environmental, land development, so a wide range of services for the industry.
Okay, cool. I mean, yeah, that was going to be my next question, was what attracted you to the drone industry, but it was the technology, hey, and improving the data sources, because I mean, sources, that's pretty much what you're covering in your chapter.
Right, you know, I mean, you know, it's interesting. I see drones as, you know, not so much the platform, but I look at drones as remote sensing for the masses. Okay, suddenly, you know, you have a whole new category of or numbers of population that can actively participate in the remote sensing activities. And you know, that obviously it's like anything, it has its good and its bad. You know, the sensor technologies are phenomenal. The drone industry has come in and allowed manufacturers to relook at their technologies and make things smaller and lighter so they fit on drones. You know, specifically, you know, companies like Regal have, you know, completely refashioned their LiDAR units. You know, that were, you know, hundreds of pounds and only fit into large aircraft, and now they've been scaled down to, you know, maybe 10 or 12 pounds and can fit on a UAV. And you know, the access for people to that technology is completely different. But then again, you also have the flip side of that, and you know, so using agriculture as an analogy, it's like, well, I went out and bought a tractor, now I'm a farmer. You know, there's a lot more involved in the process, and you know, just because that you bought a tractor doesn't mean you're suddenly going to be successful in farming and make a, you know, sustainable income. So, you know, so I think, you know, if there's anything to you know, in the sector or in the aspects of the drone imagery or the drone usage, is the incorporation of things like systematic planning into the drone data collection process. You know, it's good data starts in the office with robust planning, understanding your sensors, and then taking that out into the field, and then, you know, looking at your data, understanding the general process of how you evaluate the quality of that data, and then building the new workflows into your specific application to have the sustainable use of drones and really understand the value of the overall technology.
No, I think that's a really important point that you made in your chapter. I love the title of your chapter, Sensors and Sensibility. I think that was it. I think it's perfect. But no, I mean, right off the bat in your chapter, you make that point that you're not actually a pilot, really. You're a data collector in many ways, was sort of what you were sort of indicating, and that there's a responsibility for that data that you've got to catch, and how you catch it, should I say, or collect it.
No, and you know, and look at how, you know, look at how the industry evolved. I mean, you know, in terms of a technology release, the the availability of the technology, you know, almost simultaneously was available to, you know, PhD level researchers and 12-year-olds at the same time, you know, and suddenly it just hit the market. And so you had people interested in robotics, you had people interested in aviation, you had people interested in data science. All of them suddenly had this technology was suddenly available to them. You know, it was an easy order on Amazon, and you had a drone, and you know, you may or may not get a license, and you go out and fly. And you know, the technology at, you know, the 12-year-old level really isn't that dissimilar to the academic researchers. I mean, it's rarely have we had that type of you know, technology to hit the market at so many different levels. So, you know, with that, you have the people that were interested in remote control aircraft, and they're like, okay, I'm a drone pilot. I'm going to go out and fly and collect all this data and create a business. And then you had, you know, industry models of where it was like Uber for drone pilots, you know, where you could just, you know, call up and order a drone pilot, and they would come out and fly your site. And it really didn't, there was nothing about it that said they knew anything about data collection or what they were, you know, what they were trying to do. And so I think there's, you know, there's a lot of that kind of, you look at the Gartner hype curve. I mean, you know, we peaked very quickly in the you know, kind of the unmet needs or just the hype in the technology. And I think we're kind of on the backside of that now. And now you're seeing, you know, the power industry adopt, you know, UAV technology and the UAV sensors for power line inspection, for fire hardening and risk assessment. You're seeing it pulled into the environmental industry for conservation and critical habitat, obviously in agriculture, and then survey and mapping. They're never going back. I mean, drones are now the accepted practice. So to think that you're going to go back and, survey land topography on, 50-foot centers over acres and acres is just doesn't make sense anymore. Of course, you're going to use a drone. So, I think that technology adoption will continue, and you'll see more and more of the professional applications. But with that are the development of the workflows that's saying, how do we collect good data? And how do I now change the way I do things? One thing, UAS technology is really good at is consistency. I mean, it's one of the great weaknesses of humans, the ability to do something day after day and, maintain focus and, and the same type of quality, where when you send out the UAS, it does, it flies the exact same flight mission with just, within a few centimeters. It takes the same imagery. And so day after day, now you can start to look at realistic changes and really quantify, things that you've never really been able to look at before.
Absolutely. There were a couple of things you made me think of as you were speaking there. And I mean, you sort of saying how I love the fact that the drone technology is to a certain degree being a catalyst, and it is prompting people to think, well, how can we use this? And as you say, there's so many industries and disciplines that have adopted and will not go back. But one of the other things I thought was really interesting is how, arguably drones were developed within a military capacity. But now the military, it's gone full circle, and the military is now interested in using the delivery drones for medical supplies on the battlefield. And I think that for me is fascinating, that it's completely, everybody goes, oh no, this is a military thing. Well, if it wasn't for the military thing, we wouldn't have the civilian drones. And now it's interesting that the military now want to use the civilian drones. And I love it.
And I don't think drones really reach their full capacity until we have a unified, consistent policy for beyond visual line of sight. I mean, they are able to fly miles, and the military's proven that. And where does that technology come from? Does it come up from the consumer market, or does it come down from the military application? And I think within the next couple of years, we'll see, UAVs at a consumer level that are able to fly, 100-mile flight missions. We're already seeing that with things like Zipline, like you mentioned, the delivery. And that will really be a game changer for things in the power utility and oil and gas industry, where you can, in security, where suddenly you can send a UAV out and it does a 2-3 hour flight mission and comes back. That also was super high res, with LiDAR at 150 points per meter squared, phase 1 imagery at 100 or 150 megapixels. I mean, each flight mission may come back with terabytes of data, and that then that will spur more development in the AI and machine learning technologies, as there's basically no way that you could actually get through that data in a reasonable time frame. So I see a really bright future for the industry. It's like I said, I mean, I think it's remote sensing for the masses, and people will find more and more applications for it.
Yeah, no, I agree. It also highlights that sometimes it's easy for people just to focus on the drone, but it isn't. It's more than that. And you've just highlighted there, it's also the people developing the software, or the AI, or the machine learning algorithms, and those kind of things. There's an enormous industry or number of disciplines associated with this industry, and it's not just the drone. To focus on that is missing a big picture.
Yes. I mean, that's how we started this company. I mean, we always thought, it's not really about the drones, it's about the data.
Mm.
And eventually, people will start to realize that more and more. But I think as the industry matures, it will be interesting how you see companies evolve. So you take, pure drone companies like DJI, just making drones. Now they're entering the software market. You look at Precision Hawk that started out making drones, and now they don't make any drones. It's all based on data analytics and software. But that was that was the experience I had at Schlumberger. I mean, they started out with geophysical logging tools, and then they developed those wireline tools as a service to go out and collect data. And then as people like the data, it evolved to a software, and then, in the end, to more of decision-making tools. And I think that's the technology cycle. You start out with things like the drone and sensors, and the evolution becomes something much larger.
It's completely off the cuff, but do you think that at the moment we're too siloed with the data management and assessment? Do you think that there's more to be gained by integrating all these data sources? Whether or not, obviously I think there's some privacy and confidentiality issues to deal with there, but I'm just curious, are we maximizing the value of data that's being collected? Like, say you do a particular survey, but somebody who's working from an environmental conservation perspective might be interested in the same data. Do you know what I mean? Is there data sharing or opportunities to still be exploited in that sort of
absolutely.
line? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, let's take the example of the power utility. I mean, on an international basis, if you look at the commercial manufacturers of, the components of large-scale transmission or distribution, it's probably not that large. There are a few major manufacturers that probably have a large section of the market. So you have, now you have this repository of, billions of images of power infrastructure, where you can look at the shape, the integrity, get some idea of the general lifespan of these assets out in the field. Imagine having that type of AI library to look at, and you have your power line, and you can say, well, based on, these other, 50 million images of the same insulator, I can say that this is probably at 75%, life expectancy, and I should look at replacing this, within the next 2 years. AI gets so much better the more training you have to put into it. So if you have repositories of of habitat, of agriculture, these things where you have things through the whole life cycle, through forests, things like that, I really think there is a great opportunity for those type of libraries to be valuable. But where do you store them? How do you access them? What are the privacy issues? So there's that issue. But then I think there's also, when do we start looking at, really changing the way we do things? So let's take the construction industry and specifically the earth moving, which is probably, one of the lowest tech industries out there. You're just out there moving dirt every day. Well, now technology is finally starting to come to construction, and you have these automated machine grading where, they can, these dozers and graders can operate, in centimeter type accuracy on their own. And so this autonomous construction site will be a reality, just like autonomous mining sites. But then we measure the amount of material that's been moved into the site or out of the site by weighing dump trucks. I mean, it's, you just can't get more of a crude technology where, you look at changing the workflow, and now I'm going to assess my construction site every day. I'm going to fly it with a drone. I'm going to accurately map my drone within a few centimeter accuracy, and I can tell on a daily basis exactly how much material was moved in or out of the site, and I know where it was moved in and out of the site. And so no longer am I going to pay my contractor based on truckloads. I'm going to pay my contractor based on exactly how much material they moved per day. And then once I know the material they've moved per day, I can start to aggregate all of my construction sites, and I can say, well, contractor A has 30% greater efficiency than contractor B because I have this, production curve, or I can look at the business intelligence associated with how material is moving around the site, and suddenly it's not, well, the site's going to be done in 2 weeks. The site's going to be done, based on the material being moved in out, in 2.75 days. That's the type of analytics you can start to bring in when you have different measurement systems. And, that's the type of, when I say remote sensing for the masses, you would never look at that type of imagery and calculation for a site without UAS technology. I mean, you're not going to fly an aircraft every day over your construction site. It's going to cost you thousands of dollars. Whereas the drone, may be operated at the end of the day by somebody at the site, and the imagery is uploaded to, some software platform, and the results come back. Or, or maybe every construction site has an autonomous drone off in the corner, and it, pops up and does its job every day.
Yes, I've seen, I think it was Drone Deploy sort of posted a sort of futuristic assessment on how drones would be used in construction sites. And it was almost along the lines that the site manager gets a WhatsApp message in the morning saying, oh, by the way, we've done your site already. This is what you need to do. I mean, it was really, but it doesn't sound that far-fetched anymore.
No, I mean, mining's moving to autonomous haul trucks. They're moving to autonomous shovels. You look at the technology coming out of Caterpillar. I mean, they're running, 3 large dozers simultaneously, all autonomously. It's not that far away. I mean, it's really starting to work, but you need the quantification. You need to know whether you're accurate every day, and that's where I think, the UAS or drone measurement technologies really come into play.
But you do make the case in your chapter, though, that again, I mean, some of the other authors have said the same. Not every drone is going to solve every problem. One drone doesn't solve every problem, and you equally say one sensor doesn't solve everything that you need, because you keep saying remote sensing for the masses, but that being said, there are standards that need to be followed, isn't it? You just can't go out there with a drone and think you're going to get an accurate, or can you?
No, and no, and that's still, that's the science behind it that needs to be incorporated into every data collection activity. You need to have QA, QC. I mean, there have been companies out there saying, oh, you don't need ground control. Oh, you don't need this. You don't need that. Drone's so accurate. Oh, it has RTK. It has all this. But that's not really QA, QC. That's blind faith in that it's going to work. And most of the time it's not. And so you need the QA, QC programs to understand whether your inertial measurement unit on your LiDAR is starting to drift, whether you're seeing cycle slips in your GPS reception. I mean, there are so many factors that go in that, a few simple, quality assurance, quality control program type measurements ensures that you have that repeatability and accuracy day after day. And that's that systematic planning that needs to be built into your programs.
That's something that I'm seeing coming out with training these days. They're not just training you to be a pilot anymore. It's once you've done that, now have a course on where do you want to use the drone. And it is giving people this so-called, if you want to call it, insider knowledge. You can't just fly your drone over a field and think you're going to get the crop data that you need, because you might find the sun's in the wrong position, or it was cloudy this day and sunny that day. And it's almost like the tricks of the trade are being learned after. You get your basic pilot skills now, you need to go and learn how to apply all of that within your discipline.
And there is a model for that. I mean, it was quite unexpectedly, but the model comes out of the thermal sensors, where you have different levels of, I think it's the national standard, but for thermography, where there's level 1, 2, and 3, thermographers, and, drone pilots that are flying thermal sensors for building evaluations, are trained in the specific of that sensor. And so they are not only a drone pilot, but they are an expert thermographer. And those people are delivering better data. And, we could look at possibly a model of that type of training or certification for every type of sensor. Whether it be, imagery and structure from motion processing, it could be associated with, LiDAR and survey, it could be, it could be associated with, more, specialty type of sensors. But, I think that may be something that the industry should look towards, developing those type of standards.
Well, I am seeing reference to standards like this now coming up. I think Europe have produced some standards, and then DJI certainly showed them, I can't remember if they did it or someone else did it with them, was how to use drones as part of their public safety sort of services, for humanitarian and disaster management. And I think that sort of thing brings confidence from the public. I mean, I think there's still a suspicion about drones to a certain degree, but if you have standards and you show that you're using them, you can start to change the attitudes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't understand the agricultural industry, but I mean, the use of, multispectral imagery for crop health is not intuitive. I mean, there are multiple bands to look at. There are multiple ways to process the data, whether that be EVI or NDVI, or, there are specifics for water. That's where that remote sensing expertise comes in. And, but then again, a lot of those, remote sensing, the algorithms and the complexities associated with that were based on satellite imagery, where you had 15-meter pixels, and once you're down to 2 or 3 centimeter pixels, the ambiguity of what's being seen in an individual pixel is all taken away. I mean, now it's like, okay, that pixel is a plant. It's not a plant and soil and, all the other things that would be in that 15-meter pixel. So the complexities in remote sensing and agriculture and evaluating, crop health are kind of resolved by sensor resolution. It's having pure pixels of saying this pixel is specifically a plant, this pixel is specifically dirt. makes the evaluation much more robust and much more, science than art. But then again, there's no real standards for that. I mean, people can buy these, incredibly sophisticated sensors and go out and fly, and they're evaluated, at the same level as somebody who may have, 20, 30 years of remote sensing and multispectral evaluation of crop health.
You say that you make a point in your chapter again about being held liable relative to standards. Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're a registered professional, and you are, in an unfortunate situation of where somebody's, questioning the validity, or you're called into some sort of, legal type issue, your main defense is going to be standard of care. And were you doing things in a professional manner that would be done by other people of your profession at the same time and location? So, if they had access to different technologies. Now, you start to look at that, and you start to look at the general resolution and completeness of the data that can be evaluated from a UAV, and your standard of care may change because somebody using a UAV with a LiDAR sensor that has a 10 millimeter accuracy and precision may see things that would not have been detectable using older technologies. So let's take an example of the tailings dam failure in Brazil that occurred a couple of years ago, and the engineers and people at the mining company were held liable. The movement and the indicators of that failure, were in the matter of just a few centimeters in terms of movement. And so when you look at that, and you look at the awful environmental devastation and human death toll associated with that, you start to ask questions of, were they using the best technology to evaluate that situation? And in the future, knowing that this technology is available, are they practicing the best standard of care to understand the risks associated with those structures? And that's where standard of care comes in. And looking at the UAS technologies and the resolution of the sensors, I think standard of care is moving. And there will be people that will be questioned about their decisions and about their data methodology if they're not using this technology, because it's quickly becoming the standard of care. There are enough other people using it, and they could be called and saying, you measured this to this degree of accuracy, but your profession is now using Y technology that has this level of accuracy, and you would have seen this movement, or you would have seen this change, and therefore you do not meet the standard of care as a professional.
It would be an interesting, it's a different side of the coin for attracting the industry, the technology, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it's well, I mean, but the thing is, I think it's a recognition that standard of care isn't static. Standard of care is dynamic. We learn new things. We do things differently. Technology comes into play. You need to recognize that, what you did 10 years ago, you may need to reevaluate, and you may, your competitors and your peers are doing things differently.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you see it in the aviation industry, don't you? I mean, after every accident, there's a change. There's some form of new procedure or new specification or new training. You can't stay,
right.
You've got to stay relevant. So yeah. It's true. Yeah. Okay. I think it's one of the things I certainly got, a sort of message I got out of your chapter was, that they are an important data gathering tool, but it's not quite as easy as it looks.
Oh, no.
No.
I've been doing this for years, and we're still striving for the perfect data collect. I mean, it's unbelievable how many things can go wrong and how few times everything goes right. I mean, we've actually been doing a number of larger data collects, actually using the UAS sensors on helicopters, just because, it's that accessibility. It's easy to take the same sensor, put it on a helicopter, and you can, it's the interim way to solve the beyond visual line of sight. But, one problem we've had was, you've really got to get out there and fly at, solar noon to minimize the amount of shadows you have. It's always been problematic with the structure for motion processing to have shadows, and, pulling the image together and to get a good ortho image. Well, so we go out there with the helicopter, solar noon, perfect timing, and we're flying, I don't know, about 100, maybe 100 meters, and we get the data back, and every image has this wonderful shadow of the helicopter on the ground. So we have like 1,000 images with each one having a little, imprint of the helicopter on the helicopter shadow on the ground. So it's a continual learning exercise, and you've just, you've got to go back and understand, all the different factors you have associated with your data, and it's a continual improvement process. Okay, what did we do here? What went right? What went wrong? How do we, handle this issue? And so, that there aren't, like I said, I mean, technology is changing so fast. There's no standard, cookbook to go back to. You've got to change the recipe for every time, every new sensor, every new technology that you're using, and you eventually get better. But yeah, I mean, realize you're just going to have just some catastrophic mistakes also.
Okay. Yeah. You've got to be quite thick-skinned for this, I think.
Oh yeah. If you're not willing, being on the cutting edge of technology can just be painful. When it works, it's great, but yeah, I think every person who's been doing flying UAS missions, whether it be the technology associated with the drone or with the sensor or whatever, has run into problems. If it's not environmental conditions, it's software updates, it's electronics, yes,
that's true. Yes, it can be trying.
Yes.
How have you seen the current situation with COVID-19? How have you seen that either affecting your particular part of the industry or the industry as a whole?
We've seen maybe about a 50% reduction in our workload due to COVID, and so that's general. And it's not so much things being canceled, but budgets being slashed, within the mining, certainly within the oil and gas industry. the power utilities still seem to be moving along, but obviously land development and things like that have just come to a standstill. So that type of work, has been pushed off or delayed. We expect that it will still happen, but that's been the immediate impact to our business. I think in the long term, there will be a reluctance to have large field crews out in the field. Talking with people that are developing post-COVID safety practices, suddenly it's one person per vehicle, maintaining social distancing in the field. I think those type of programs will make UAS technologies more desirable. Anything where you have, less people or one person can do more on their own will be, attractive to those type of industries. And, things like, digital twin technology and, remote imaging of infrastructure where you don't have to have people go out in the field and they can do their work remotely will also become more popular. So, I think there's a short-term impact to business volume, but I think there's a long-term value to potential workflow changes within the overall industry. And I think that, that especially in surveillance, things like that, is that UAS technology will become more attractive.
Have you seen UAVs being used in Colorado for whether it's to help social distancing or it's deliveries or anything like that? Are they in use at all?
No, we don't really, allow the deliveries, and so that'll still be a ways off. I mean, there's talk about it, but I have not seen any real movement in the technology. I mean, I would say the U.S. is a little bit behind in that. And then there's still some regulatory changes. UAS technologies are not adopted by things like the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency or the Health and Safety Organization, OSHA. They just have they have never developed their internal policies of how to use drones or UAS technology, so they're just not allowed. And so there's changes like that just need to occur before we can really reach the full adoption.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I thought the EPA might have wanted to adopt drones, but I thought that would have been quite a good one in particular.
It's that's because EPA got in trouble very early on when they were using a drone to review an animal feeding operation I think in Wyoming, and they were hit with privacy concerns early on, and they've never really recovered. And the White House had issued an edict that every U.S. agency and department was to develop a drone policy. And EPA is now, I think, 6-7 years behind, and they still have yet to develop a policy. So their policy is, we don't allow use of drones. Okay. Now you can fly airplanes, you can walk somewhere, you can use satellite data, but if it comes from a drone, they are not favorable to that data.
So,
yeah, it will change.
Put it mildly.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming from my environmental background, it's difficult to see that because it's one of the industries that could that could benefit most from the technology. And it has yet to be adopted. So, well, hopefully we'll see something here soon.
I hope so, because no, you're absolutely right. I mean, especially when you start adding the machine learning, I've seen some of the work that people have been doing to identify animals, I mean wildlife, and how effective this is, and just saying, oh, ping, this is this, ping, that's that, ping, that's that. You know, it's like, it's real-time identification of animals, and it's fantastic to see it. And it's a shame, yeah, that this sort of technology isn't.
You know, I mean, you know, if you look at, you know, a phase 100 megapixel camera at, you know, 100 feet, the ground sample distance of, you know, each pixel is, I think, like 3 millimeters. Okay, so, you know, so if you're going to map desert tortoise, or you're going to, you know, map insects, I mean, you know, unless you get in your hands and knees and you get, you know, a couple inches in the ground, you're not going to get the same resolution that you are from those type of cameras. I mean, they are just incredible. And so, you know, here you have something that can, you know, fly quietly over a site, you know, collect, you know, just really just amazing imagery, and being able to, look at, you know, wildlife, or, you know, down to, you know, very small, you know, sizes is just, why aren't we using that technology more? You know, and then, you know, you bring in you know, like you say, the AI or machine learning technology, and it's like, yep, that's a desert tortoise. Yes, that's a desert tortoise burrow. You know, I mean, it's not just the specific, you know, creature, it's also the, you know, habitat count associated with it.
Absolutely. Is it, I mean, what sort of, I mean, again, sometimes it's easy to just think there's one type of drone, and it's the quadcopter, and it's, you know, sort of about this big. I mean, what sort of drone carries that kind of camera? Does it need to be a bit more of a robust, higher altitude type sort of thing, or can it still be a reasonable, you know, sort of multi-rotor? Because, I mean, sometimes that seems to be a barrier, as people are only thinking at one level when there's multiple types of drones that can fly at different altitudes, conditions, you name it, you know?
You know, I mean, there's a definite class of you know, UAVs that are carrying, you know, packages, you know, sensor packages that weigh in the, you know, 7 to 10 kilogram range, and there are hybrid motor technologies that are now extending the flight times for those to, you know, to 2-3 hours. But, you know, you even take a look at something like the Wingtra fixed wing drone, you know, and it's carrying a 42 megapixel camera. You know, one of our flight partners just purchased a Watts Innovation drone that can carry 7 or 8 kilograms, and it's carrying the Regal Vox LiDAR sensor plus a Sony A7 R4 61 megapixel camera. I mean, these are just amazing payloads. You know, I mean, it's just, you know, and we're flying that daily on both helicopters and drones. You know, it's just, you know, it's literally just unbolting it from the helicopter, you know, putting it back on the drone, and going back and forth day to day. It's really, you know, just amazing technology.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? It's so exciting. I mean, this innovation is just wonderful. It's so intoxicating.
Exactly.
I tell you, I don't know who's going to do it, but I'm very envious of that person in NASA who's going to fly that sort of helicopter drone on Mars. I would love to be able to do something like that.
You know, but I mean, you know, look at where that technology came from, though. I mean, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you. I think we can carry on, but we probably we'll have another chat sometime. But how can someone get hold of you? How can they talk to you more, or maybe use your services?
So I can be reached at my email is joliver@DataSight DataSightUSA.com. You can reach in the website there. Also, I'm listed under Jim Oliver, R.G. for registered geologist on LinkedIn. That's always a great way to get a hold of me.
Cool.
And
okay,
so,
great. Yep. Sorry, Karen.
Oh no. And so those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me. But
okay. Excellent. Thank you. I'll put those with the video and on the LinkedIn thing. But thank you very much for your time. That was I really enjoyed that.
Thank you so much. All right.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. I'll just say cheers to the audience. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And remember, here's Drone Professional 1. It's available in Kindle and paperback format on Amazon. It is a good read. As you've heard today, we were talking as much about data as we are about the drone technology. There's some really interesting subjects covered in here. So if you want to know about the industry, get Drone Professional 1. But in the meantime, thank you very much again, and keep well and keep safe. Cheers.
All right, thank you.